So, Nick, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre have been trading jabs, whatever the cliche is, in question period. And I'm wondering if either one has sort of come out ahead in the minds of Canadians as a preferred prime minister. And you have the latest numbers on that.
Hey, Michael, giddy up. It's a horse race.
Ooh.
When we ask Canadians every week who they would prefer as prime minister, and check out the numbers, you can see basically a statistical tie between Pierre Poilievre and Justin Trudeau, both at 30%. Jagmeet Singh is back at 15%. However, check out the numbers on the 4-week change. So looks like a lot. Pierre Poilievre up 12 points, but we have to remember that in the Nanos tracking, we always have someone in the Conservative spot. Candice Bergen was. So basically, this is the improvement for Pierre Poilievre in the wake of the leadership and his real numbers. So we basically have a coin toss between Pierre Poilievre and Justin Trudeau as to who Canadians would prefer as prime minister today in the weekly Nanos tracking.
Well, welcome to a new episode of CTV's Trendline. I'm Michael Stittle.
And I'm Nik Nanos.
And Nick, we can dig into this even further because you did a survey for the Globe and Mail where you tracked what positive and negative things people had to say about Trudeau and Poilievre. I guess their overall likability, I suppose we can say. And what did you find out?
How about a 3-letter word to sum this up? Ugh. Wow. We asked, to your point, we asked an open-ended question. Canadians could say anything they wanted about what positive things they associated with Trudeau and Poilievre and the negative things that they associated with Trudeau and Poilievre. So it was completely open-ended. People could say whatever they want. For Justin Trudeau, the leader of the Liberal Party of Canada, his top like was, pause, dramatic drum roll, nothing at 31%, followed by the job that he did during the pandemic at around 12%, people saying that they liked his social policies at 12%, his ability to represent Canada. Hair came up, and you know what? Don't be mad at me, but some people actually responded hair and his looks, that he cares about Canada and he does a good job. So top unprompted positive association was nothing, or people couldn't think of anything. And then the job during the pandemic and his social programs.
Wow. What about Poilievre?
Well, on Poilievre's positive associations, we just said that Justin Trudeau, 31% of Canadians said there was nothing they liked. No positive associations. Well, for Pierre Poilievre, it was 41%, so even higher.
Wow.
But in terms of those articulated positive associations, things like stands up for Canada, good speaker, bright, those were the things that were most likely to be mentioned by Canadians on the positive side of the ledger for Pierre Poilievre.
Wow. That's a pretty high percentage for nothing on both leaders, Nick. I mean, what does that say about how, I guess, does that speak to the divisions within Canada and on how we feel about our political parties?
It speaks to both of these officials being polarizing figures, that a significant proportion of the population doesn't like anything about either one of these, and they're just not happy with a lot of the choices. So it speaks to Canadians being divided on both of these leaders when it comes to positive associations.
Nick, so not a lot of positive things, I suppose, but what about the negatives?
Well, the negatives were also there for both of those leaders. For Justin Trudeau, his top negative was too much spending at around 16%. Another 8% said there was nothing negative that they associated with him. Then people use words like out of touch, untrustworthy, the controversies, arrogant, all that kind of stuff on the negative side of the ledger in terms of negative associations they had with Justin Trudeau.
Okay, so that's it for the Prime Minister. What about Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre?
On the negative side of the ledger for him, too right-wing, top unprompted negative association around 22%, 13% they couldn't think of anything negative. And then things like the convoy came up. People use words like polarizing, brash, Trump-like to describe what they dislike about Pierre Poilievre. I think the key takeaway Michael, on the negative side of the ledger for both Trudeau and Poilievre. One spends too much.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I'm pointing the right way. And the other one is too right wing. So, and I'd like to say, Canadians do not object to government spending, but it's just too much spending. In the same way, there's probably many Canadians that like many of the policies of Pierre Poilievre, but it just might be seen as a little bit too right wing.
Poilievre is really focusing on the problem of cost of living and inflation in this country, and I'm just curious how that's playing into this, and also where that is in your own issue tracking.
Well, in the weekly tracking, when Canadians can say whatever they want in terms of their national issue of concern, it's almost like a four-way tie right now. Jobs in the economy at 15, inflation at 13, healthcare 14, environment at 12. So, what you can see is a lot of meat and potatoes issues like inflation and jobs in the economy, but also healthcare and the environment, top concerns that Canadians have. How about this? Why don't we call it a buffet of anxiety when it comes to top worries that Canadians have right now?
Sounds like it would give me a stomach ache. So what's the sort of historical significance, I suppose, when the preferred PM numbers are kind of split and inflation is a bit high?
Well, what's interesting is that in a survey that we did with Bloomberg News, we asked them to identify, or asked Canadians to identify, which federal party leader they trusted most on economic growth and on reducing inflation. And on economic growth, it was basically a tie between Poilievre and Justin Trudeau at 28 and 28. Jagmeet Singh was back at around 14. Another 14% said none. However, the interesting thing was that when we asked Canadians who they trusted to reduce inflation, Pierre Poilievre comes out at 30%. Justin Trudeau is back a full 8 percentage points at 22. And then we have Jagmeet Singh at 10, none at 18. And to put this into context, there was a period back in 2015, Stephen Harper, when he was seeking re-election, was very strong on the economy. He's a fiscal conservative. He had a pretty strong track record, at least on economic issues. And I remember we were doing some polling and we asked Canadians, who they trusted, which party leader they trusted on stuff. And as soon as Justin Trudeau started pulling ahead of Stephen Harper, who was the prime minister at the time, you knew that Harper was in trouble. So the big question now is, Pierre Poilievre looks like he's done a better job at defining his position and showing strength on things like the rising cost of goods and inflation, fighting inflation and stuff like that. Could he use that as an advantage? And should Justin Trudeau be really worried that this new challenger is actually stronger than him on one of the top issues that Canadians are fixated on?
Wow. Nik, presumably a federal election is still a few years away, but whoever is prime minister may have to deal with some pressure against federalism in this country. We touched on this last episode, talking about the huge mandates won by Ontario Premier Doug Ford and Quebec Premier Francois Legault. Since then, Danielle Smith has become the new leader of Alberta. I want you to listen to this.
Albertans, not Ottawa, will chart our own destiny on our own terms, and we will work with our fellow Canadians to build the most free and prosperous country on earth.
Yeah. I think, free, chart our own destiny. This is a former leader of the Wildrose Party as well.
Yeah. Do you know what, Michael? I listened to that, and maybe she's being cagey, because I think you could interpret that two ways, that Albertans and Canadians will work together to have the most prosperous country on earth, which could be Canada, or Albertans will work with Canadians to have the most prosperous country, parentheses, Alberta, on earth. So I don't know. Sounds a bit vague to me, but I think depending on how you feel about the Federation, why don't we say this? You probably heard different things. And I would hazard to say that she's not saying this, this is not said in this particular way by accident. It's said on purpose. And I think this is what the federal government has to be worried about, what I'll call more muscular flexing of political muscles in different provinces, and I put Alberta at the top of the list. I'd also put Quebec on that list because Legault just got a really strong mandate. He's a strong believer in provincial rights and provincial leadership on a lot of the big issues, and provincial, I'll call it small I independence, not capital I independence. So I think this is probably going to be the narrative for the next while. How is the Federation working? Are the premiers working at cross purposes with either each other or the federal government? It could speak for some turbulence for Justin Trudeau and the federal government.
I should also just put this in wider context too, that Alberta still faces an election next year. That Danielle Smith, she's replaced Jason Kenney as leader of the United Conservative Party, and therefore she's the new premier. But she herself hasn't really faced an election yet, so it's not the same kind of strong mandate that Ford and Legault have.
No, but the thing is I think I would expect her to talk tough. She's going to talk tough because she's going to need to build her brand and build profile, and also to chart a path differently from Jason Kenney, so she can be, her own leader in her own right with her own vision for the province of Alberta. So I would expect her to talk tough, talk big, in order to get profile, especially since Rachel Notley should not be underestimated. She'll be a serious challenger to Danielle Smith, and it'll be a really interesting election in Alberta in the coming year.
Nick, we're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, we'll talk about masking on planes.
Super.
Nick, so earlier in this episode, you talked about the top issues facing Canadians, and I'm curious again, where was the coronavirus in that list?
Is this kind of like Where's Waldo? Like, I didn't see coronavirus at the top of the list. Well, it's not at the top of the list because it's at not even 1%, is 0.8. I don't know if I'm writing this backwards, but anyway, 0.8% of Canadians cite coronavirus as their top unprompted national issue concern. So let's set aside whether that we're in a pandemic or whether the virus is spreading or all that other kind of stuff. We're just talking about how Canadians feel and what they're worried about. Coronavirus is not even near the top of the list. People are, like we said earlier, people are more focused on jobs and the economy, inflation, healthcare, and the environment.
Now, the flip side of that, perhaps, you've done a survey for CTV News on how Canadians feel about wearing masks on planes going forward.
Exactly, because now many of the restrictions have been lifted. Where individuals are not required to wear masks on trains, planes, and stuff like that. And we asked how likely or unlikely people were to wear a mask, even though it was not required. And what we found was about 55% of Canadians reported that they were likely or somewhat likely to wear a mask next time they travel on a train or a plane, while only about 35% or something like that were unlikely to one extent or another. So looks like even though people are not worried about coronavirus, there'll be a significant proportion that are still exercising caution, so to speak, in terms of their health. Maybe they're just worried about getting the flu, not just the virus. The other interesting thing is that men were less likely to report using a mask or saying that they'd be likely to use a mask compared to women. But that shouldn't really be a surprise because women usually are individuals that are making healthcare decisions for other members of their family, perhaps children or parents and stuff like that. They also tend to have key roles on the healthcare front. So it's probably not a big surprise that they're more likely to report saying that they could be using a mask, even though they don't need to when they're traveling either by train or by plane.
So it sounds like this is sort of the new normal. We're not, the coronavirus isn't a top concern anymore, but that doesn't mean that we're ignoring it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what this means is that we're in a phase where Canadians are thinking of managing the impact of the coronavirus, managing the variants, and just basically exercising prudence. And the reality is, if someone wants to wear a mask, they can wear a mask. It could be because of their personal situation, in terms of their personal health. It could be that they're caring for someone who's a part of a vulnerable population. And I think wearing masks, although not required, and will not be as widespread as we've seen before, is just going to continue to be part of our culture as part of a voluntary way for some Canadians to protect themselves and also to protect their loved ones.
Nik, that's it for this episode. As always, thank you very much.
Thank you.